Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you sports information from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is @Indus News Sports. That works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of football, Euro 2020 final. Italy beats England 3-2 on penalties, while Argentina beats Brazil in the Copa America final on Sunday. And yes, from the world of Wimbledon, Djokovic finally claimed a record-equaling 20th men's title by beating Italy's Matteo Berrettini in Sunday's Wimbledon final, while world number one Ashley Barty won a women's title against Pliskova, and she's the first Australian to get the title. And yes, from the world of UFC, McGregor breaks his own leg in the UFC trilogy loss over Poirier. And yet from the world of Olympics, Nigeria stuns Team USA with shock win in Games exhibition match in Las Vegas. And yes, those were the headlines, and not to forget that what a weekend it was. I think it was interesting in every possible way, from football to tennis, but surely we'll start off from the world of football. Talking about football, we talk about Euro 2020 to begin with. Yes, Euro 2020, when England managed to score the first goal on the second minute, which Luke Shaw did, but obviously it came to a point in the second half where Italians managed to make their comeback, and obviously Leonardo Bonucci managed to score that goal in the 67th minute. But to discuss the in-depth analysis of Euro 2020, and not to forget, obviously, of Copa America final, we have with us Colin Mott. Colin, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on again.
Great. So Colin, we'll start off with the most interesting match that happened, obviously the final of Euro 2020. And I think where the match all began was obviously the second minute goal by Luke Shaw. And I think England was, I saw how the fans were interested and happy and all crowded, and everybody was like in a surprise, because I think it's the first time ever that someone actually managed to score a goal at the second minute of the game in the final. So how do you begin with obviously talking about the entire match, England versus Italy?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, it was a fantastic tournament from start to finish. And the final really had everyone on the edge of their seat. As you said, Luke Shaw scoring after 2 minutes. And that coming from an Italian corner kick that was cleared up the park. And Luke Shaw, a fantastic ball from Harry Kane out wide, and the cross coming over from Kieran Trippier. And Luke Shaw unmarked at the back post. It was a great finish. And from that point onwards, we weren't really sure how the game was going to go. The Italians eventually sort of grew into the game, and from that point onwards, England were really on the back foot. As you mentioned earlier, Leonardo Bonucci scoring from the corner. It was really good from the Italians that you saw that they were pushing and pushing and pushing. They never gave up, and you saw that from the corner as well. A great header saved by Jordan Pickford onto the post, and Bonucci was in the right place at the right time to tap it home. And from that point onwards, you just didn't know how the game was going to go. I think both teams deserved extra time.
Right.
If anything could be said that where the English probably went wrong was in their substitutions. I think they waited far too long to bring on some players. You saw they've got some great attacking options on the bench, like Marcus Rashford, like Jadon Sancho, and they didn't really get the chance to come on and stretch that Italian defence, which looked very tired in the second half. But Italy kept going, and you know what happens when it gets down to penalties. England don't have a great record, and the Italians just know how to get the job done.
Right. And bringing the match eventually to a point of penalties, I think it's one of the most shocking times, because if we actually look into the penalties, we can surely see and understand the amount of pressure that each and every player had on them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've always got that when you're going second in the penalty shootout. You're always going after. If the team scores before that, the pressure's always on you.
Right.
Great start from Berardi and then Kane.
Right.
Pickford saving Belotti's penalty gave England a really good chance. Maguire smashed one into the top corner.
Right.
But from that point on, when Bonucci scores and Benedetti scores, you're then looking at who takes the English penalties. And Marcus Rashford, he was only on the park for 2 minutes. Jadon Sancho, a young player at the beginning of his career, again, only on the park for 2 minutes, never really got a chance to get up to speed. And as you said, Saka taking the final penalty. It's a lot of pressure to put on a 19-year-old boy
Right.
to step up in such an occasion as that to try and score the penalty that would give England the chance to keep the shootout going. You look at some of the players that didn't step up to take penalties, guys like Raheem Sterling, John Stones. These are guys that have got the experience of playing in these competitions, and the pressure was on someone like Saka, and it was a shame for him to miss it. But when you look at it, if you're going to get to these occasions and you need your big players to step up, and unfortunately for England, that wasn't the case last night.
Well, to be very honest, they could have made that up, because I think you're absolutely right. In terms of the pressure build up on a 19-year-old boy taking the last penalty is surely heartbreaking for him. And not only for him, I think in the long run, he will have so much of pressure for him grown because of the fact that he missed the last penalty.
Yep.
But there were so many out there players, so many superstars in England's team with a lot of experience. And I think they should have chosen them wisely over getting those penalties.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they even took Jordan Henderson back off the park. He only came on in the second half of the game, and then they took him off in the second half of extra time to bring on someone like Jadon Sancho. That's someone who's got the experience of Champions League football, of winning the league with Liverpool, and even someone like Jack Grealish, who's been the go-to man for England this whole tournament. None of them had the opportunity to take the penalty. It fell to young Saka, who's only 19, and that's something that can really destroy someone's confidence. So I think if Southgate looks back on it, it's probably a decision he'll regret.
Right. And besides all this, I think after the after the Euro 2020 final, there were a lot of racial things happening all over Twitter. People were reaching out, and I think that's not the essence of the game. And I think my message to all the fans out there, all the players out there, how people have started, using race as a term to fight and, pinpoint fingers specifically to the England team. And obviously the FA obviously is also condemning. Even Prince William's condemned all these racial abuse that has been happening over the internet. So what's your take on this?
Do you know, it's a really sad reflection on the way that football's going, because you look at the movements that's been carried out over the last sort of year to 2 years, taking the knee before the games, the Black Lives Matter movements, and it's sad that it's now 2021 and we still see things like this. I think it comes down to what can we do now? What can social media companies do to stop this from happening? These people that are going to posting straight after the game, what action can be taken against them? Because as you said, these players, if they're winning, no one cares what colour their skin is. But as soon as something happens and it's a black person or a coloured person that causes this, they get so much abuse online, and it's not fair at all. They don't deserve it in the slightest, and it's about time that action was taken.
Well, let's hope that people learn from their mistakes, because I think racial abuse is not something that can be associated specifically, even if it comes to a point of a match. But anyways, I would also want to talk about the big second game that actually took. We're talking about the Copa America's final, obviously, how Argentina managed to beat Brazil 1-0. And I think Argentina has finally won their title after 28 years. So what's your take on this particular match?
Yeah, again, it's the battle of the big two in the Copa America between Argentina and Brazil. As you said, Argentina's first title since 1993, and Messi finally wins that trophy. I think he was kind of getting to the stage where he didn't know if he would ever be able to win anything with Argentina, but that is a massive victory for him. If you're looking at the sort of greatest of all time comparison between him and Ronaldo, that means they've now both won a major tournament, which is great. The tournament overall was very entertaining to watch, although sadly behind closed doors for most of it. Hopefully we'll see the fans back in there soon. But that Argentina team, they look like one to keep an eye out for in the World Cup next year in Qatar. Messi and Martinez up front, Di Maria, Lo Celso, and a big shout out to the Argentinian goalkeeper Martinez. His saves in the penalty shootout got Argentina to that position, and again he had another fantastic match against Brazil. Keeping a clean sheet.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, how much impact is it going to get or give to all the teams, even if we talk about Euro 2020 or we talk about Copa America, because I think it would surely raise bars for their confidence level. So how do you see, because everybody, all the teams out there are currently preparing themselves for Qatar 2020, the upcoming World Cup to be precise, because we can't even be sure yet because it's going to be in 2022 or not. So I decided not to say that because of the COVID-19 variation that is also coming up. We talk about the Delta variant. So I was inquiring, how much confidence is it going to give to all these players and how much shattering would it do to all these players after winning and losing such tournaments finals?
I mean, you've got to look at it. This has all come after what has been an extended season because of the pandemic. You've seen a lot of these players were playing for their teams in the Premier League and La Liga and the Bundesliga, and they were playing maybe 2-3 times a week because of scheduling, because of games that had to be rescheduled. So to play another full tournament after that as well, it must be very, very tiring on them. But as you said, as you get into the latter stages and you've got the chance of winning that silverware, the sort of momentum kicks in and the adrenaline kicks in. Right. And although maybe the standard of football wasn't the greatest, that drive and determination to win got them to the end, and eventually Argentina won the trophy. And you've got to think that the momentum that they can take from winning competitions like that will see them into the World Cup, and hopefully it will be held next year. And I would have to say, when you look at it, I'd say Italy and Argentina will have to be one of the favourites when we look at the tournament next year. And it'll be interesting to see how the groups line up.
Right. I would also want to ask you, Colin, in terms of football, you probably have a better idea that, there were a lot of question answers and question marks with regards to how people were being there at the show, watching at the stadiums, not really taking care of the coronavirus situation, because apparently now there's a Delta variant out there which is surely causing more and more issues. So who would be responsible for not ensuring, because obviously we know how the transmission works. So how do you see that impacting? And I think having the Delta variant out there, even if you have been vaccinated, the point is it's still very risky. So don't you think the management should have a lot of questions to answer to the public?
Yeah, I do. I definitely think it was a very political decision to allow the amount of fans into the tournament at Wembley, considering the level of infection that's currently going on in England at the moment. In Scotland here, we're looking at getting fans back into the stadium, but when you compare a 60,000-seater stadium like Celtic Park, they only allowed 2,000 fans in. Now, when you look at Wembley, if you were to do that, that's a 90,000-seater stadium. So you'd be expecting, if you followed that guideline, somewhere in the region of 4,000 to 5,000 fans. Last night, that stadium looked close to capacity. Now, they said there was only 60,000 in there, but we obviously seen the horrible scenes down in London with the fans storming into the stadium without any tickets. So trying to put an attendance figure on last night's game will be difficult. But again, England seem to be moving into this transition period where next Monday it looks as if all restrictions will be lifted just about. So they are trying to live with the virus instead of dealing with the virus. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for them, because as of the start of the Premier League season, it will be full capacity stadiums. So how that will play out, I think, will be one for all the leagues around the world to keep an eye on, and it just looks as if England are going to be the guinea pig.
Right. Well, let's hope for the best. Let's hope the virus stays under control, and I think some new regulations need to be impacted for the fact, or the government needs to look into this, because once again, we do not want the world to suffer, and obviously the sports to suffer. Well, thank you very much, Colin, for being a part of the show and discussing the world of football with us.
Thanks very much, Alamdar.
So that was, and obviously he told us the inside-out, in-depth analysis with regards to how Italy managed to beat England to begin with, and yes, we talked about Argentina versus Brazil, their final victory. Obviously, they're in 28 years they finally managed to win the Copa America Cup. But anyways, this was from the world of football. We'll take a quick break. Once we're done from the break, we have more sports news coming up your way. See you guys after the break. And yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of football, how Italy managed to beat England 3-2 on the penalties, and not to forget that Argentina also won against Brazil 1-0 to be precise. But anyways, that was pretty much from the world of football. Now we'd focus more on the world of tennis, because there's too much happening. And yes, I'm talking about Wimbledon. So when Wimbledon finally came to a conclusion in which Djokovic finally managed to beat Berrettini to get his 20th Grand Slam title. But to discuss the in-depth analysis, not only him, Ashley Barty won the women's title as well. So we'll discuss more on the in-depth analysis. And we have with us Meherban. Meherban, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alamdar. Pleasure to be here again.
Great. So, Meherban, we'll start off with obviously Djokovic's victory, the victory against Berrettini, and not to forget how Berrettini managed to get here was also super interesting. But what's your take on the final itself?
Yeah, so the final was very interesting because you actually had, to the surprise of many, um, Djokovic, who was up 5-2, but Berrettini actually ended up taking the first set. So
Right.
usually when Djokovic is in such a position, up 2 breaks in the set, he's going to close it out. But Berrettini fought back very well, started to hit his forehands much deeper, and he ended up taking the tie break. But then we had Djokovic, he's so comfortable when he's down, and he was able to come back and pretty much take an early lead in all of the sets and cruise to a comfortable victory after the first set. So it was a very interesting match.
Right. But if we look back how Berrettini managed to get here, we surely want to talk about the semifinals, how he managed to win against Hurkacz. And not only that, if we go back a match before, if you remember, he was facing Roger Federer, and we definitely had a discussion on that because the match was initially delayed because of the rain. But we were expecting Federer to move forward, and I think we obviously talked about the fact that he would be the oldest person to probably move and step into the semifinals. But where did exactly Federer go wrong to begin with?
Yeah, well, it's tough for Federer. He has had a bit of an injury spell somewhat recently, I would say. And even though this is his best tournament, best chance to win a Grand Slam, I would say, I think that he just hasn't been moving and playing as well as he had in the past. And so he came up against a very difficult opponent, in Hurkacz. And, straight sets was a very surprising loss, especially the 6-0 last set there. But,
Right.
We have to give kudos to Federer, and, quarterfinals at almost age 40 is still pretty amazing. And we'll see, whether he plays, he'll probably play the US Open. And then after that, we're not sure. But it's just, I think it's a matter of age. And it's still amazing that he's at this level, reaching the quarterfinals of a Grand Slam.
Right. And yes, my bad with regards to discussing Berrettini. Obviously, we wanted to talk more about Hurkacz. And then obviously stepping into the next game, if we talk about Hurkacz, but not being able to show his wit. Because if you make sure that you win against someone like Roger Federer, I'm sure your confidence level is definitely skyrocketed. So I was probably hoping for an interesting semi-final, which obviously Hurkacz had with Berrettini. But obviously Berrettini managed to advance forward. So how do you see that going further for him in the future?
With respect to Berrettini?
Yeah, with respect to Berrettini to begin with, yes.
Sure. Yeah. So Berrettini, very talented. He said in his post-match press conference or his interview that this was just the beginning. It is the beginning. He's 25, so he does have a lot of upside potential. He has been improving. I think last year we saw him hit a ton of slice backhands, where now his topspin backhand is much better. He has a big serve, big forehand. And so he does have a lot of upside, and he has a good team around him. So I do think that we can see him in the future potentially win Grand Slams, especially having that nearly 10-year age difference with Djokovic.
Right.
So I do think that he has a great upside for the future.
Right. And obviously, if we talk about Hurkacz himself, because, he was the one who probably managed to, win that quarterfinal against Federer. So what do you think, where did he go wrong? Because if we look at the sets for him against Berrettini, obviously, they're not a very stronger ones. I think the third set was the only one where he was trying to get there to maybe continue the journey, but I think he was unable to do so. And specifically, if we talk about the second set against Berrettini from Hurkacz was 6, as in Hurkacz had 0, and obviously Berrettini had straight 6 games. So how do you see that impacting him in the future?
Yeah, I think sometimes this will happen, especially in the semifinals of a Grand Slam. I don't think Hurkacz played his best because he obviously has a big serve, big forehand as well, like Berrettini, and so he definitely should be, holding serve at least a couple times in the set. So I think that, hopefully he will just take this as a great advancement forward. His seed, I think, was 14, and he reached the semis. So he just needs to go back and watch the film and see where he went wrong. And, some of that is probably the nerves. And he also has a lot of great upside for the future. So we'll have to see how he pans out. But that definitely was not, a normal performance from him. It should have been a closer match, I think.
Right. And if we now switch over to women's side, of course, I want to focus more on that, talking about how Ashley Barty managed to win the first title. Obviously, that she's the first Australian to win this Grand Slam, and she won it against Pliskova. So how was the overall impact? And I think being that first person of a country to get this amazing title, I think it would surely give her a lot of courage, and maybe she'd want to continue this journey of winning further Grand Slams.
For sure, Ash Barty, just a great accomplishment, and kudos to her too, because she pretty much had the match in her pocket in the second set. She won the first at 6-3, and then she was up a break, was serving for the match, but Pliskova, to her credit, came back and played really well and won the second set in a tie break. But
Right.
Ash Barty, a lot of times mentally it's very difficult for the person who had lost that second set to prevail in the third. But Ash Barty just stayed composed and told herself to keep fighting, as she said in the post-match interview, and she did so, and she closed it out 6-3. Very impressive. I think the first Australian, as you mentioned, to win the title
Right.
on the women's side, and so that was really a great accomplishment. She's number one in the world already, so definitely she has a very solid all-around game, and definitely very impressive and a great moment for her and her country.
Right. And Mehrbaan, if we talk about the Wimbledon itself as a whole, if we look back into Wimbledon, how a major turn of events actually took place in this Wimbledon, I would want to have a word from you with regards to how Serena Williams obviously managed to have that injury, and she was asked to retire. So even though she was looking forward to continue and get herself a position, but obviously she was left in tears on that. So what's your take on that? Because I think Wimbledon 2021 this time has been filled with surprises.
Yes, it was disappointing. I remember watching the first few matches, and it was just really incredible, how Federer's opponent, Manarino, slipped and fell and had to withdraw. And then we had Serena herself slip and fall and had to withdraw as well. So the grass is a very slick surface, especially in the beginning when there's not much play on it yet. And, I think Serena, she loves the game. She's a fighter, and I think that she will definitely be back and recover. But it does get much tougher as the time passes for her and for Federer, who in nearly 40. So
Right.
she will be back. She loves the U.S. Open, and I think that'll be interesting to watch to see how well she does. But hopefully she recovers from the injury. But it is, grass is definitely a different surface, and so it's tricky for people to play on, especially if they haven't practiced on it much beforehand. And so that's why we saw that injury with her. So that was unfortunate.
Well, it surely was unfortunate. But anyways, Mehrbaan Ranchad, thank you very much for being a part of the show and discussing the world of Wimbledon with us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Alamdar.
So that was probably in-depth analysis of how things have developed. Yes, Djokovic has finally managed to get the title. Not only him, Ashley Barty managed to win the women's title. So I think many, many congratulations to them. This was from the world of tennis. I'll quickly jump over to the world of UFC. Yes, a very, very interesting match that was happening, obviously, but McGregor managed to break his own leg and in the fight against Poirier in Las Vegas. And I think after that, the match was halted for the fact that, the medics were asked immediately to come to the octagon, because if you look at the footage, it's the kind of footage you would only want to see for once, because I think he probably lost his balance in terms of the fight itself. And I think it's going to be very tricky for him in terms of the recovery part, because the kind of injury that we saw, we've seen a lot of injuries lately in terms of sports, but I think this is one of the most dangerous or deadly injuries that you would see. But anyways, we wish them a quick recovery. Obviously, it was clear that McGregor could not continue that match because the way his leg was actually literally fractured to the point of no return. So I think, and I wish that he gets quickly recovered, but I think coming back into the fight again would surely take a very, very long time for him. Anyways, that was from the world of UFC. I'll quickly jump over to the world of Olympics. Yes, talking about world of Olympics, a practice match which was basically happening in Vegas. It was more of an exhibition match, and Nigeria managed to win against Team USA. Nigeria shocked them with a victory of 90 to 87 against the USA. And not to forget that USA obviously was hosting this exhibition match in Vegas, but Nigeria managed to win that. And it was the first time ever the USA managed to lose against any African nation. They had never defeated, Nigeria before. But I think it's going to be an interesting. The only last time that they faced Nigeria, the US had 156 on their side and 73 back in 2012. So anyways, that was for London Olympics. But I think it's a bigger shock for them in terms of this. And Kevin Durant scored 17 points and Tatum scored 15 points for Team USA. But it surely is a shocker in terms of sports, but I think that is what sports all about. Anyways, guys, if you want to reach out to us, on our social media handle, which is @Indus News Sports. That works both for Twitter and for Instagram. Till then, take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.